Welcome to another episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast. Today, I'm going to start a mini-series in the podcast all about my process of onboarding clients and taking clients through the first few weeks of training. This is something that I've gotten questions about in the DMs, obviously things that people have a lot of questions about in general. And I thought it would be good just to record a mini-series here, that way people could reference it. If you are listening and you've been on the fence about starting coaching, or you're another coach and you're curious just how I do things, I wanted to give you a podcast series, just a few episodes on a little bit more detail, what this looks like for me, how I think about starting with a client, and what I'm looking for. So this is going to be a 3 or 4 part series. Not entirely sure if I'm going to combine 2 of them or split them out, but that said, today's podcast is going to cover how I onboard new clients. So once somebody's come in, what do I do with them? How do I onboard them? And then what are we doing next? So I really want to stress that this is an iterative process. So I'm always looking to refine, improve my coaching process, my services, my onboarding, and what I provide to my clients. So this is not set in stone. It's always getting better. I'm always iterating based on what clients have to say, based on the results and any other feedback I get. So for reference, if you're listening to this in the future, I am posting this on, in July sometime, I think July 15th, but in July 2025 for reference. So if this is December 2025, August 2026, or some other time in the future, my onboarding processes may be slightly different. If they are different, they'll be better. So if you like what you hear here, you're going to like what you hear in the future, or like what you see in the future if you start working with me in the future. So, but yeah, I really just wanted to get in. This is going to be kind of a conversational solo podcast, just going over what I look for and how I onboard clients. So if you've been interested, this is the one for you. The very first place I start with every single client is the consult call. So it doesn't matter where they come from, if they come from Instagram, if they come from my email list, YouTube, or anywhere else, my podcast. The very, very first thing we do is hop on a consult call. This consult call is going to differ based on the client though, because I already might know a good amount about the client if we've spoken before in the DMs, versus if they just book a consult call, I've never talked to them before. There's going to be a lot more discovery that has to happen in that call. But the overall goal of the consult call is going to be to make sure that we're a good fit, that they understand what training and coaching is going to look like, what I'm going to deliver, and what their responsibilities are. And for me to understand what their goals are, what their limiters are, ask any questions that I might need to know more info about their life, equipment that they have, schedule availability. And overall, I'm trying to do a bit of diagnosis in this call. So I really need to diagnose what their problem is. That way I can share with them exactly how I'm going to help, what strategies we're going to put in place, and what training is going to look like for them. Because I do not provide cookie cutter programs. I do not provide just a templated training plan. It's truly individualized coaching. So this consult call is so important to diagnose the actual problem, not what they or you might think is the problem. Because often we as individuals, when we're struggling with something, we might think the problem is one thing, but it's actually another thing. And this happens all the time for myself and pretty much every single client. They come in with a specific goal in mind. They think they have to do X to get to that goal, but they actually have to do Y. For, I guess, some of you math nerds or just kind of nerds, the way I fill in things is X and Y, but you get the point. So often in this consult call, I will have at least received a pre-consult call intake form, but not all the time, depending on where they come from. And sometimes I don't require that, just because sometimes somebody books a consult call to learn more about me and they don't really need to take the time to fill out a pre-consult call intake form. But again, the amount of information I have will depend on where they came from, if we've had conversations before. But overall, can I help them? Do they understand what it looks like? Are they a good fit for me? Am I a good fit for them? Gives them a chance to overall ask any questions they have. And again, just make sure we're a good fit, because that's the most important thing when it comes to coaching. Coaching, one-to-one coaching, at least the way that I do it and the way I think it should be done, is so reliant on that relationship. The relationship is crucial, because without that relationship, it's just a training plan. And that's not coaching. That's just providing somebody a training plan. Coaching, and this is a bigger topic, I'm not going to go into it too much right now, but coaching really is that relationship. I have to learn the client has to learn me, and just figure out how we do things, how we communicate. If the client says something was hard, what does that mean for them? Because hard is different for different people. Are they prone to oversharing, which is great because I get all that information? Or are they prone to undersharing? And do I have to read between the lines a little bit more to get the information I need? These are all things that I'm starting to think about in this console call. Then in the console call, everything's good. They're ready to move forward. We go over quickly the app I use. I use a program called Training Peaks, which is where I give clients training. It's a nice app that you have on your phone. I go over that with them, make sure they understand how it works, make sure they have sync set up with their Apple Watch or Garmin or whatever they have, and just make sure that they understand how training is going to be laid out. I lay out training generally 1 week at a time. That way, the training's always adapting to how the client is responding. So if they have a particularly bad week, the next week we can adjust. If they're having a good few weeks, we can continue on that momentum. I don't really like to program training in huge blocks, like 4 to 6 week blocks, just because I can't know how the client's going to respond. I can't know what life things are going to come up, how you're going to respond to the training. So I generally program 1 week at a time. We talk about that, see if that's going to be a problem, because for some people with their job and their schedules, they need to know more in advance what their training is going to look like. And so again, I'm always meeting the client. I'm meeting you guys where you're at. So if you need 2 weeks in advance, 3 weeks in advance, I will do that. But then every week I'm still taking a look at it, tweaking as needed based on how the week went before. So overall, we just go over that, make sure they understand, ask if they have any questions, and really tailor our approach to you or the client, whoever I'm speaking with, just to make sure that you are getting what you need. We also go over my check-in process. So if you've been curious how I speak with clients, this is kind of the check-in process. Again, this is iterative. I'm always improving. I did do a recent really big push on this process recently to improve it, and I'm continuing to improve it more. So that said, everybody's really busy. I'm really busy, but you guys are also really busy. People have jobs, families, hobbies, friends. And so I don't think weekly or bi-weekly video check-ins works really well, because it makes the check-in process very rigid. You have to do it at a certain time every week, and you can't plan around it. What happens when you go on vacation? All of these different things. So I don't think video check-ins every week, every other week are good. I think video check-ins once a month might work, but that's not enough for me. I like to check in weekly with my clients. So then it becomes a question of, what about type? What about forms? There's things like Typeform, Jotform, Google Forms. I used to do those. I'm not a huge fan of those because, well, I'm not going to get into too much about it, but it's not very personal. I just see a form that you fill out. It's not very personal. I'm not a huge fan of it. So I still want the video check-in, but I don't want the schedule constraints of the video check-in. So what do we do? I prefer asynchronous video check-ins. So what this looks like is once a week, depending on the client, it might be a different day. I tend to batch check-in responses on certain days, but the clients will take their phone. I was looking for my phone to grab it. Oh, here it is. Clients will take their phone and record a video of themselves answering some questions that I put in their training. So I'll put a block that says check-in questions, and they'll go over the questions, and they'll just record themselves answering them. I find some people are a little uncomfortable with this at first, just because they don't like talking to a camera. They don't like videoing themselves, but I only get the videos. I don't do anything with them. And I find after a few weeks, most people tend to settle in and really just don't think about it anymore. The reason I like to do this video check-in is it's a good time for me to hear how the week has been answering the questions, but I also get to hear about the body language that they use. I get to hear their tone of voice. I get to hear any tangents their brain might go on, which is really important from a coaching perspective, because I need to understand what all is going on in your life if I'm going to program training appropriately and understand all of the other stressors that go into life. Again, these check-in questions, they're not just training questions, they're also questions about what wins do you have that are not training or nutrition related? What have your energy levels been like? How has family life been? If there's a family, I tend to tailor the questions to the client a little bit. But overall, I want to get a good idea about how they are as a human and as a person, not just how they are as a number on my spreadsheet and as a athlete that I'm programming for, but truly as a human, how are you? How are you feeling? How have your training wins been? What things have you struggled with? And overall, hear their body language as well and their tone of voice. That way I can craft a great training week for them, but also a really good coaching response and meet them where they're at in that coaching process. So that brings me to my response. I use a program called Loom right now. I like it pretty well. I don't see any reason to move away from Loom. But what I do is I watch their video, I take notes, I watch the entire video, whether it's 2 minutes or 20 minutes, and I've gotten both. I watch the entire video, and then I'll record a response of myself responding. What Loom does is it shares my screen, so I'll pull their training up and any spreadsheets up that I have for maybe their nutrition, their body weight, their weights, their PRs, their run times. I'll pull all that up. I will share my screen, and it also records my face, and I'll record a response, just going through any questions they had, my thoughts for the current week, how things went last week, where we're going next week, any plans for events that we have in the next few weeks or travel that we have in the next few weeks, and then just overall answering their questions about life and anything else that they might have as well. So this allows me to give a very detailed response to clients and get very personalized feedback from them and overall build the relationship really well without that schedule constraint of every week or 2 weeks we do a scheduled Zoom call. So then when it comes to training, we do an assessment week, which I am planning on going over another podcast in the future on this, so I'm not going to go super in depth, but what we'll do is we'll conduct kind of a hybrid assessment and training week. That first week we work together. How much is assessments and how much is training is going to depend on the client, their goals, how much they like formal assessments versus just getting right into training. Well, we'll conduct a assessment/training week, and then I'm going to sit down after that first week. I just did this today for a new client, and I'll do what's called a needs analysis of where we need to be and contrast that with where we're at now. So basically, I'll take their goals and I'll say, in order to reach these goals, we need to be here by this date, which means we need to be here by this date, which means we need to be here by this week or whatever. And then I'm going to say, how do we do that? This is the needs analysis. This is our gap. This is what we need to do. And then I'm going to plan out generally how we're going to progress to that goal. I'm not going to get super in the weeds because the client's life changes day to day, week to week, and trying to create a 6, 8, 12, 24 week plan all up front is just wasted time because it's going to adapt so much. So if their goal is farther out, so say somebody wants to run a 5K in 12 weeks, that's pretty simple. If someone wants to do a Ironman, say next year or in 2 years, I've had some clients that have really long-term goals like that. I'm going to encourage them to decide on some mini goals. So these are things that are going to be achievable along the way, get us to their goals, but be exciting and be things that they can be looking for, kind of like a 10-yard target. People will say that if they're in the military, or shooters say that. It's a term that I carried over from my time in the military. So what is that 10-yard target? What are we shooting for initially? And then that's going to bring us to the longer term goal. So for example, if somebody wants to do an Ironman, we might set a half Ironman as a closer goal. And then closer to that, we might set a Olympic triathlon. And then even closer, we might set a sprint triathlon. Sprint triathlon is pretty short, pretty achievable, still really fun to do. They give you the energy, they get you time practicing on the bike, doing transitions. If there's somebody who doesn't know how to swim or doesn't know how to bike comfortably, then we'll maybe even set a shorter term goal of get in the pool and swim 1,000 meters. So we're going to set these shorter goals, these mini goals, to build wins, build momentum, and give us a shorter term direction, because it's really hard to stay motivated for that Ironman in 2 years when it's Saturday morning, you're waking up before everybody else, you're exhausted from the day before, and you have to go do an hour run or a long bike. So setting those shorter 10-yard targets is really, really important for motivation, for momentum, and for clients generally. So with all that laid out, I kind of spoke about this already, but I'm going to do ongoing modifications week to week. So training is going to go forward from there week to week. I'm going to use the data from the workouts in Training Peaks, the comments they leave in Training Peaks, the texts they send me, voice notes they send me, and the weekly video check-ins to inform each week of training. So I take a holistic, whole human approach here, and that's something I'm very passionate about, and I think everybody should be doing, because I've made a lot of content on this in the past, but truly, truly, deeply, everything that goes on in your life is interconnected to everything else. So if you have stress at work, that's going to impact your training. If you lose sleep, that's clearly going to impact your training. Your training also impacts everything else. So I really want to understand, how is life going? How do you feel about your overall life values and purpose? Are you very stressed about anything? Again, I'm not like a life coach. We're not going to go into all this stuff. I'm definitely not a therapist or claim to be, but understanding how people are mentally, spiritually, if you are religious, or if not, then just kind of esoteric spiritually, physically, these things all come together to make a whole human. I'm coaching humans. I'm not coaching numbers on a spreadsheet. So the training is always going to modify based on that. And then overall, I mean, all of this is just with the end goal of crushing their goals, right? We're going to crush the goals they come to me with, but we're also going to just make sure that in the process of reaching these goals, they feel aligned with their overall existence, their overall values, life purpose, why they're doing things. A lot of people, you might have a difficult goal of losing body fat. You might have a goal of an Ironman, a half marathon, a marathon. Obviously, I work with performance athletes. I work with a lot of people that have pretty big goals, ultra runners, tactical athletes, marathon, half marathon, pretty fast 5Ks is even really, really hard. I would actually argue sometimes a all-out 5K might be harder than a marathon, depending on how hard you run the marathon. But anyways, I digress. You don't do these things unless they are rooted to some deeper purpose, some deeper human need, whether it's to feel competent, whether it's to push yourself, to feel like you're a part of a community, to set an example for your kids, to hold the standard yourself. There's a lot of different things and motivations for this, and they're really deep. Everything comes back to some form of basic human need. And I want to make sure that we're keeping that in sight while we train for these things, and that we don't get to our goal and realize I lost what was really important to me in the process of this goal, and I kind of lost myself in the process of this goal. I always want to make sure we're aligned there. So when we're doing training, when I'm doing check-ins, when I'm talking to clients, I'm really trying to get a grasp of how do they feel? Do they feel in line with why they're doing this? Are they kind of questioning things? Is the question normal, or is it maybe a sign that we should reevaluate, because some amount of questioning and uncertainty is always normal? But overall, just making sure that through the action that we're taking, the client is becoming the best version of themselves holistically, not just a really good athlete, but then dropping the ball in all these other areas of life that are important to them. And the result really is that top tier results that I told you about: crushing goals, feeling aligned with your life, in touch with why you're doing things, and overall becoming a much happier, healthier, more confident, more successful, more fulfilled human. With that said, that is this podcast. It was pretty straightforward, how I onboard new clients. The next episode is going to be what I look for in new clients. So if you're listening to this, you're interested in coming on as a client, but you're not quite sure if it's right for you, hopefully this gave you some insight. But definitely subscribe if you haven't, set up notifications. That way you can see next week's episode, which is going to be all about what I look for in a new client and what tells me they're going to be successful versus maybe it might be a little bit more of a struggle. And if you listen to this episode and you are excited, you're ready, you say, this is for me, I don't need any more info, I'm ready to get started, or you're pretty sure you're ready, but you're not quite sure, you don't really want to wait to listen to a few more weeks of podcast episodes, but you want to know more, you can look in the description. There's going to be a link to book a completely free consult call with me. We just went over what the consult call is about, so you'll know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to diagnose your goals, what your struggles are, what's going to be in your way, and then I'm going to share with you exactly how I would help you with that. Absolutely no pressure on these consult calls. I love talking to you guys and getting to learn more about your goals, what is important to you, what lights you up, and overall you'll walk away with information on exactly what you need to do next, how I would walk you through that, and have an opportunity to get started if you are ready and we're a good fit. With that said, I will see you guys in the next episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast.